Hey, real quick, it'd be great if you could consider subscribing to the YouTube channel down below. It really helps us out.
Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
All right, Dan, time for it. Time to talk some Florida Gators.
Nice.
On today's
Gator.
episode, it's been a minute since we dedicated an episode to the Gators. I think today is the day. We are very excited to have our good friend on from Gators Breakdown. Gator David Waters, is going to be stopping by here momentarily to give us the lowdown on all things going on in Gainesville. How are you?
I'm good. Very excited. He's not going to join us. He's going to join you. I don't want people listening to this right now and saying, I would never like to hear what Ty Hildenbrandt has to ask a Florida Gator expert. Thank God Dan's on here to balance out this equation. I'm not on this interview. My schedule has been sort of in flux childcare-wise, so Ty is just an American hero for recording this one solo. And I don't like listening back to the show because I don't like hearing my voice and hearing what I have to say. Maybe that's something I have in common with listeners. I'm very excited to hear this interview with you and Gator Dave, who you said was terrific.
He's terrific. Finally got you out of the way. I can ask
true.
The questions that I want to ask.
Yeah.
Of
Dead
Dave,
weight.
Of the Florida Gators. Yeah. This interview was conducted like a day or two ago. We're recording this a little bit later on in the week. It's going to go live for the public on Tuesday morning. And I've been a big fan of Dave's work for a while now. He's just really thorough. And you could tell has a genuine passion for covering the team and getting to the bottom of some of these stories. So when we had him on last time about 2 years ago, I think I immediately said to you afterwards, we got to have David back on again at some point soon. Didn't do it for 2 years now. It is 2025, but it comes at, I think, a very pivotal time for anybody who follows college football and is interested in the Florida Gators. There is a lot at stake in 2025. And as we've been going through and doing some of these team conversations, we'd be remiss to not examine what's going on down there with Billy Napier in Gainesville.
Oh, absolutely. And with some of the recent years of Florida football, that Gator Dave is just as locked in as ever, just as passionate, just as much as an artisan about Florida Gators football coverage. Todd Grantham has done some things to people, Ty. And that Gator Dave is still here, still locked in.
Made it through.
I have nothing but the highest level of respect for it.
We're gonna have a long conversation here with Dave momentarily. If you are new here, if you are tuning in for the first time, thank you so much. Hit subscribe, hit follow wherever it is you can. If you're interested in further supporting what Dan and I do, you can go on out to verballers.com, VERBALLERS.com. We've got a Patreon community. We've got a Discord community that's attached to it. You get episodes without the ads, bonus episodes, so on and so forth. Without further ado, let's hear from Gator Dave. And with that, we are very pleased to welcome back to the Solid Verbal Gator Dave. It is David Waters from the Gators Breakdown podcast and YouTube channel and website. He's all over. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Waters. How are you, my good friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back on. I am a consistent listener of you guys, listening to when I got to zoom out from all the Gator coverage. I'd certainly check into the Solid Verbal, enjoy the banter between you two guys, and certainly looking forward to talking some Gators. But dude, I had to let you guys know I am a listener as well.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. We appreciate that. I want to know, what's the vibe been among Florida people this spring? What's the vibe been among the Harmonic Woods tailgaters this spring?
It was a little subdued tailgate for the spring games last time we all got together, but that's a fun group. Always is. It's every home game. The mayor of the tailgate getting there 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and setting it all up. So we're all ready for that when Florida kicks off against Long Island there to start the season. But Vibe Gator Nation, of course. Excited coming out of that win streak of the 2024 season, beating LSU, beating Ole Miss, and now, of course, got a returning quarterback there with DJ Lagway. A lot of returners on both sides of the ball, so that gets Gator Nation excited. A lot of questions still surrounding this program as well, and specifically Billy Napier, the head coach, leading it all. But the vibe is as good as it has been since really Billy Napier took over.
That's good news. I wanted to ask about Lagway though. Before we hit record, you were like, "Yeah, we've been covering this story, and people have been asking about DJ Lagway for a good majority of the spring. What is the status of DJ Lagway?"
Well, the good thing is we just had SEC spring meetings, and of course, Billy Napier was going to be asked about that at SEC spring meetings and said, "Hey, look, he's throwing. I mean, he even threw an exact number out: 210 times a week, 3 days of the week, throwing 210 times." He goes, "Hey, look, if we didn't even go through the storyline of spring, that's what he would be doing anyway." So
right.
There's the latest on DJ Lagway. Everything's A-OK, 100%, full steam, ready to go. Billy Napier did tell us right after the spring game and kind of the last press conference of spring that, hey, look, yeah, not throwing right now, but when June comes around, that's when he'll be throwing. And lo and behold, June starts, and then here we are getting the report that DJ Lagway is 100% ready to go. So certainly kind of shies away. And of course, I think it's going to hang in the back of minds. I think given the huge, you got your 5-star quarterback, so much just riding on this season, so much just riding on DJ Lagway. You go through an entire spring where he doesn't throw. It's going to hang in the back of everybody's mind until they, the team lines up and you see Lagway, of course, go back and rare 175 yards like he's been known to do.
Yeah, I mean, what was the official diagnosis there? I feel like there was a lot of playing coy with what was or wasn't, I guess in this case, wrong with him. What was the official word there?
Shoulder tiredness.
Okay.
So, put him on a pitch count. That's what I mean. It's kind of there, but it dates back to, and I think it was a high school injury that kind of dates back to, and of course he was an early enrollee at Florida as his freshman year. So certainly go through spring practice, and then I think toward the beginning or toward the end of the season and having that winning stretch, and he's playing against LSU and playing against Ole Miss. I think something happened in one of those games, and you could see credit to those defenses too. Florida ran the ball really well, but did limit Lagway. I mean, he still had some spectacular and outstanding plays along the way, but there wasn't a lot of the deep shots. There wasn't a lot of rearing back and throwing one way down the field. I do think something happened along in that little stretch of LSU Ole Miss, but I think everything's A-OK from talking behind the scenes, talking to people in the know, that it should be pretty fine for DJ Lagway moving forward.
That's good. That's good news. DJ went 6-1 as a starter. I guess could have been 7-0 if he doesn't get hurt against Georgia. Who knows? But
6-0 in games he started and finished.
6-0 in games he started and finished. There we go. Florida finishes 8-5. As you said, some good late season momentum. The defense, we can talk maybe a little bit later about what clicked there, but real tangible momentum at the end of the season. Did you see the progress that you were hoping for as somebody who follows this team as intimately as you do?
Took a while to get there, but yes. I mean, you can't forget the gaffes and the really uninspiring performances to start the season against Miami and Texas A&M. I mean, those two games in the swamp, you have your home crowd. You're going against Mario Cristobal, who's in the same year as Billy Napier. They both get hired in the same year. You just get blasted. And then Texas A&M happens. And then there's Billy Napier. There's no way Billy Napier survives this. He's getting fired. They're just saving up the money for the perfect time, and he's gone. And lo and behold, they started playing better. You started seeing signs, and then the wins came. Like you coulda, shoulda, woulda against Tennessee and Knoxville. Played, like you said, played tough versus Georgia. Lagway goes down. Who knows the outcome of that game? Now, then a week later, they go get blasted against Texas, and it's like, okay, well, maybe this thing isn't heading the right way. And then return home, have two big games, and rally around to beat LSU one week and carry that momentum into beating Ole Miss the next week. So certainly in that November stretch, you saw the progress that you were looking for, and mainly on the defensive side of the football. I mean, you saw the potential of the offense when Lagway started coming in, the big play potential, and the offensive line started finding their groove and opening up running lanes for Jaden Ball and Jacoby Jackson and Montrell Johnson. And you started seeing signs there, but that winning streak at the end of the season doesn't happen if the defense doesn't start playing better. They really become a monster up front led by Caleb Bates and Tyreek Sapp, and that really just made the difference. Now, they did live a little on that bend, don't break style. LSU, Ole Miss both still garnered a whole bunch of yardage, but once, got close to the red zone and end zone and started going for fourth down conversions and missed field goals, that defense really did its job. So that it doesn't happen without that defense really doing their part late in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking back to the last time we had you on. It was about 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago. And when we do these team-specific talks, we tend to highlight things like gaps, what needs to be fixed. Can this team get better? What will it take for this team to level up? The last time you were on, it was like, yeah, it's the defense. Defense needs to get fixed. Defense let them down. It was just a conversation about defense, very matter-of-factly. To your point, Florida had a really strong close to its season, led in large part because of that defense, which gave up an average of 13 points per game down the stretch. What clicked? Why did it get better all of a sudden?
You talk to players, you talk to coaches, but really talking to the players, I say, go back to that first bye week, and that was before the UCF game, I believe.
Right.
And they said, hey, look, we went to the coaches, and I mean, it kind of stinks that it took this, but we went to the coaches and say, hey, we demand more accountability. We want practice to be tougher. We want more competition. And the coaches listened to them, and that was the first sign. And like I said, you started seeing it. They were still losing games, but you started seeing a group that was playing better, and it finally clicked there at the end. But to me, it really was it was eye-opening to see how fast they were able to turn it around and it click up front on defense. Because I think it really started there. And with Caleb Banks and Tyreek Sapp, and you had a group of young edge players with Jack Pyburn, who's now at LSU, TJ Sears, he's at Texas A&M, but then transferred. George Gums comes along. And it was a group that really played well up front. I mean, it was an LSU team that comes into the swamp that Nussmeier wasn't getting touched. He was not getting sacked a lot, and I think Florida had 6 sacks in the game. I think LSU had given up 6 all season going into that game. So it was I think it was a lot of in a right way finger pointing. I think it was accountability that just really needed to be unleashed, revealed in the locker room. And I think let's not forget too, Florida brought in Ron Roberts,
right,
at defensive coordinator, and Austin Armstrong. He kind of was co-DC and really title only.
Right. They had the executive, as I'm going to botch the title, but it was like executive assistant coach, co-defensive coordinator. Obviously, Ron Roberts has a lot of experience. And then how that worked together with Austin Armstrong was, I know, a big talking point coming into the season. Austin Armstrong, by the way, has now since gone off to Houston, where he's going to be the defensive coordinator. Is there any concern that will kill some of the momentum we did see down the stretch, or is it not even crossing your mind?
Not even crossing the mind, because it kind of going to that point when Florida, they moved Ron Roberts upstairs. He was on the sideline for those first few games against Miami, against Texas A&M, where it didn't look good. They changed some things, a little less responsibility for Austin Armstrong, more responsibility for Ron Roberts. And you started seeing it click as the season went on. So, I mean, you start looking at it. This is the first time under Billy Napier that a returning DC, that he has a returning DC. You go back to Patrick Toney in year 1, then they bring in Austin Armstrong. And then year 3, it was Ron Roberts, basically the overseer with Austin Armstrong still there. But now Ron Roberts returns, and he is the guy. He is the voice. A little more coaching changes on the defensive side of the ball, but you still have the same voice of Ron Roberts, the overseer there. So I think because you give him a lot of credit for the reason of the turnaround last year, and you feel kind of hopeful that it continues this year for the defense.
Florida wasn't super active in the transfer portal. I think I saw only 5 guys coming in. They had much more transfer out, but it does beg the question, I think, on the defensive side of the ball, if the development of the guys who are on the roster, who have been on the roster, is going to be enough in and of itself to get this defense to the next level. How do you feel about the returning cast of characters? Would you have liked to see more portal action to try and boost things on the defensive side of the ball?
For sure, on the back end, I think so. Florida's fighting injuries since the end of last season, going into spring practice. There's a ton of injuries there on the back end. And look, I mean, Devin Moore, he actually went through spring. He's Florida's cornerback 1 after Jason Marshall left. But Devin Moore, really good player, can be, I think, one of the SEC's best corner. He just can't stay healthy. He cannot stay on the field. He's fought the injury bug his whole time at Florida, fought it last year as well. But he's going to be cornerback 1 this year. And then you got maybe a little battle with cornerback 2, Dijon Johnson, in some off-field trouble. He's fighting the injury as well. But the off-field trouble should be okay. He'll play. There's no worry there. But you got a battle between him and Cormani McClain. The former 5-star who transferred from Colorado, of course. That can be a battle there for the cornerback 2 spot. But Florida's got to get better at safety. I mentioned that the poor performances against Miami and Texas A&M, a lot of that was because of big plays on the back end that they were giving up. And Jordan Castell returns. Bryce Thornton returns. You hope Jordan Castell, who's played since he was a true freshman in year 3 now, that he takes the necessary steps. Bryce Thornton continues to improve. But it's just been a group that fought a lot of injuries, weren't able to really get a cohesive unit all through spring practice. So I think that's the biggest question. That's where I probably would have liked them to hit the transfer portal more. But also maybe defensive tackle. They did bring in Brendan Bett from Baylor with some departures, but before him, Florida tried to go get Keyshawn Silver from Kentucky out of the transfer portal. Hero Canoe, who ended up going to Tennessee or Texas as well. So you could tell Florida made a concerted effort to go get a defensive tackle. They finally got one in Brendan Bett towards the end of the spring portal, but they didn't have to hit the spring portal or the portal in general too hard because Caleb Banks returned, Tyreek Sapp returned. I mean, going for both sides of the football, Florida made a concerted effort. More so than attack the transfer portal through NIL, it was, let's use our NIL to retain guys. Right. 4 or 5 offensive linemen return. You bring back Tyreek Sapp, Caleb Banks along the defensive line. Florida's really bullish on their linebacker core. They can go 4 deep there between Pup Howard, Jaden Robinson, Miles Graham, and Aaron Childs. So it's the front 7. Florida feels pretty good about. Maybe the depth along the middle of the defensive line is the biggest concern. But it's a group I think that's going to have to continue to play well. I think to make up for a secondary, maybe it does look a lot like that November stretch, the LSU, the Ole Miss games where they gave up some yardage, but the bend don't break style wins out. I don't know how consistent that can be throughout an entire season. That would be my biggest worry for this defense is not necessarily taking the steps and having to live in that bend don't break style. I think there's some quarterbacks and some defenses that can take or offenses that can take advantage of that. But if I go back to the transfer portal, probably would have been a little more aggressive. They brought in Michael Caraway from Southern Miss as the only guy in the secondary, who's a versatile piece there. But they're banking on retention more so than they do the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a heavy emphasis on high school recruiting this cycle. Like I said, only a handful of guys came in via the portal. Bigger picture, not just defense, but bigger picture, given your knowledge of the roster, more holistically, was that the right approach? Like, did they plug the holes that they needed to plug either via the portal, via high school recruiting to kind of give them the depth and the continuity that they need? Whether it's going light on transfers or just going a little heavier on the high school side, did they accomplish the objective?
I think so. I mean, we'll see how consistent it is, but I do think for this 2025 season, they hit it. And I think, so as I mentioned, 4 or 5 offensive linemen returning. You were able to retain Austin Barber. You were able to retain Jake Slaughter, the All-American center. He returns. And then Damian George as well. Najee Harris. That's 4 of your 5 offensive linemen. And they feel really good about Bryce Lovett at right tackle. But you get to pair that with a quarterback that returns in DJ Lagway, a running game that returns Jaden Ball and Jacoby Jackson. And then it's the receiver group that's got to take the step. But you love the potential there to go get a deep threat like J. Michael Sturdivant out of the transfer portal. But they are really excited about Vernell Brown III and Dallas Wilson, the true freshman at wide receiver, to pair with a returning Tre Wilson. And as I mentioned, J. Michael Sturdivant, Aiden Mizell, hopefully a breakout candidate there as well for receivers. So probably feel they can go pretty deep there at potential of the playmaking ability at the wide receiver spot. But I think once Florida was able to, and the staff was able to say, hey, we got 4 or 5 offensive linemen return. There's a lot to like in the trenches on both sides of the ball. But once we get that, we can play our style of football. And there's just been this big conundrum of Billy Napier, the play caller.
Right.
That's you like where the roster is, but it's Billy Napier, the play caller. Can he unleash a quarterback like DJ Lagway? Can he unleash the potential of this wide receiver group? So I think paired with how they were able to construct this roster and develop receivers and develop an offensive line and a run game that the staff is really good at in that side of building an offense, they're going to want Billy Napier loves to live off that play action. They get near midfield and it's 40-yard line, 50-yard line. He loves that play action, first down, deep shot.
Right.
When you've got the talent to be able to do that. But a lot of Gator Nation is looking for more than that when you talk about explosivity. And the way I look at it is, can you, I think with this roster, and especially on the offensive side of the ball, can you be able to dictate what you want to do? A lot of people would want to, no matter what. This is an orange and blue. This is a Gator Nation. This is a go back to Steve Spurrier and fun and gun. They want to throw the ball 40, 45 times, no matter what. No matter who's on the sideline, that's what they want.
This is the style.
Force the issue. But my thing is, with this offensive style, just be able to dictate what you want to do. If you need to throw the ball 40, 45 times to win the game, be able to do so. If you need to line up and run the ball 50 times behind a really good offensive line and running back, be able to do so. So for me, when I look at aggression and the criticism of Billy Napier, the play caller, it's just be able to dictate what you want to do. If you want to pass, be able to pass. If you want to run, be able to run.
Well, you know better than anybody in the SEC that it starts up front. If you can't build an offensive line in the SEC, you're pretty much dead to rights. And as you've mentioned here a couple times, this is an offensive line that did show massive improvement. I think the last time we had you on, the conversation was about pass protection. Last year, there was a big jump forward in all the protection stats that we tend to look at. Sacks allowed, how much time a quarterback had to throw, things of that nature, if you really want to get granular about it. They also played better individually, not just as a unit. And there's a lot back this season, as you've mentioned. So I guess from your vantage point, what represents the next step forward for this line? More specifically, how will I know, as not necessarily a Florida Gator diehard, how will I know if the line gets to that level? What will be the tell?
I think the start of the season, for one, you go back and I hate hard. It's almost a tale of two seasons for Florida last year. You had the early season. Sure. Yeah, you had the early season miscues and then the big wins late, but it's getting off to a better start. I mean, not only I talked about how bad the defense was early, but a big part of why the offense struggled in the early season against Miami and Texas A&M was too because they couldn't block anybody. Now they rotated a whole bunch of people, and Billy Napier has kind of gone back and say, look, one reason we've done that is because think about college football now, and think about how many mouths you have to feed. Think about how many players you have to make happy to get playing time now. And Florida rotated and tried to get other guys some playing time. And I think that did them in earlier in the season. They finally settled on a 5. They finally wanted to move forward with playing a set offensive line. And I think that paid dividends throughout the season as those 5 were playing more and more football together. But I think getting off to a better start. Now, Florida finally gets the benefit. And think about it. This is the first time under Billy Napier. They're not opening up with Utah. They're not opening up at Utah. They're not opening up with Miami. Florida gets Long Island.
Right, you'll take that. You'll take that.
Yeah. Finally a break for Billy Napier. And then USF week 2. And then you get back-to-back road trips at LSU and then at Miami.
Right.
So it's going to take a few weeks to probably see have they made that jump. But a lot of people are going to go back and look at how are they going to start? Because last year was a brutal start for this offensive line. We're going to have to get to Baton Rouge. Maybe that's not the best barometer when you have 95,000 people in Death Valley screaming it's already set for a night game. We already know the situation it's going to be for a Florida offensive line trying to figure out, communication and that's the biggest road game DJ Lagway will have started.
Oh yeah.
Now he played at Tennessee last year, but he didn't start that game. Played at FSU last year, but FSU wasn't any good. That's going to be a hostile environment there for DJ Lagway. And an offensive line that they haven't played a ton together, a half a season together last year. So I think there's a lot of questions, but I think what we're going to look for is probably a mark of consistency. Okay. Can they start better and keep it up? They weren't able to do that last year. Even against Florida State, they probably gave up a little more pressure than I would have liked for an offensive line that was playing pretty well going into that game. FSU had a pretty good defensive line at the time, but DJ Lagway, I think, helped that offensive line look a little better by escaping sacks, by escaping pressure. And that was DJ Lagway not 100%, being able to do those things. So I do think there is a next step for Marcus consistency still in the pass blocking category. I do think running the ball, Billy Napier, Rob Sell, Jonathan DeCoster, the offensive line coaches, there's a pretty good baseline for what they're able to do in the run game, but it's a more consistent pass rush or a pass blocking for DJ Lagway that I'd be looking for.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I want to unpack the receiver thing because it jumped off the page to me that this is one of the more interesting, let's say, youthful receiver rooms in the country. I don't need to go back through and recite the names, but I do want to harken back to something I think you tweeted out back in December about Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown III, that they are two of the 7 best receivers since the year 2000 to step foot on campus in Gainesville. So in terms of incoming star power, it's there with the freshmen. You mentioned Tre Wilson coming back. J. Michael Sturdivant transfers in to give them more of a veteran presence. In addition to that, more to the point of Gator Nation maybe wanting to open up the offense a little bit more. We know that both Russ Callaway, and Steve Spurrier Jr. do have some influence over this offense. Callaway is a former air raid quarterback. Spurrier Jr. has some experience as well with Mike Leach, with Kevin Wilson in that style of offense. What are the odds that Florida does open up the offense to a greater degree than we're used to seeing under Billy Napier?
I think it has to be a little bit because of what you have at quarterback. And we saw the deep downfield success Lagway was able to have. And you have you've recruited a group of receivers that should give you the ability to do that. Yeah. J. Michael Sturdivant, and I had Billy Napier on the podcast in late January, early February. And when we're talking about J. Michael Sturdivant, he really points out that, hey, we went and got this guy to be a deep threat. He is going to be our downfield threat. And Florida lost Elijah Badger, who was near tops in the SEC in yards per catch. Chimere Dike, I believe, was top 10, top 15 as well. But a lot of that had to come with the quarterback change from Graham Mertz to DJ Lagway. That wasn't part of the offense until DJ Lagway took over. You didn't know if the receivers had that until DJ Lagway was the guy in there. So they identified a guy who could do the same things that Elijah Badger can do down the field. And like I said, that's they want to be able to stretch the field. And I think Aiden Mizell he's kind of been that guy. He's in his 3rd year, right? And he's been that guy since he was a true freshman. This is going to be the guy that breaks out. This is going to be the guy that breaks out. This is going to be the guy that breaks out. Eventually, it's got to happen. If it doesn't happen this year, you're looking at a guy who we're still wondering about. And so, but you paired it, Tre Wilson, I think, so integral to this offense. Really, what a lot of the fan base and I think pundits want to see from Tre Wilson is, can he be a true receiver? We've seen the gadget plays. We've seen the reverses and the sweeps. We've seen the screens. Can he be a true receiver? Can he can he run the slant route on 3rd and 6 and get the first down? Or can he be a downfield weapon himself? So I think for Tre Wilson, it's taking that next step and being a leader, but also being a true wide receiver in that regard. But then talked about the freshman there, and let's not forget about Nashawn Montgomery as well. Florida adds to that group, and Florida added really high-level receivers, and we got to see it in spring game. Dallas Wilson, 10 catches, a couple scores. Harrison Bailey's throwing him the ball. So you get an inkling of what he might can do with DJ Lagway. But what you're hoping for is a repeat of what we saw last year. You go back to a year ago, and you had Jaden Ball at running back as a true freshman in the spring game, doing some really, really good things. But you get in trouble sometimes with the spring game heroes. Do they ever show it in the regular season? And Jaden Ball, as a true freshman, showed it. Florida's hoping for the same thing with Dallas Wilson. And I think what gives you hope there is you heard it all along spring practice about how good those true freshman receivers were. And then you get to the spring game and you see it firsthand. What Dallas Wilson was able to do after the catch, the physicality he was able to possess. Now, you can get in trouble. A spring game can get you in trouble for the spring game star. But given the recruiting profile, given everything we heard for the month leading up to the spring game, it gives you hope that Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown III can really be those guys that show up right away as true freshmen at the receiver spot.
I know that Napier historically has liked a lot of 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, that type of thing. there has to be a desire to get more receivers on the field, given all these options. I mean, especially after the spring game with hype being at a fever pitch for a guy like a Dallas. Well, like, they have to find a way to do more with the receiver room, given the fact that they just have, I think, so many options that they're excited about.
Right. And people will say, oh, he's never opened it up. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to early. I'm like, he's never recruited receivers like this either. Or he's never had a quarterback like this either. So I get it. History
and
is
none of his stops. He's never had this.
None. Right. None. And so I get the trepidation. I really do. I mean, history is a lot of times the best indicator of what's going to happen. But I guess that is an ultimate question. Can he adapt? Is he willing to adapt? Is he willing to change? He wants to make it easy for his quarterback. Every offense wants to do that. But yeah, there's going to have to be a time. I really believe it. Whether he wants to or not, there's going to have to be a time where you need Lagway to throw 40, 45 times and those receivers step up and go win a ball game.
Yeah, especially in the SEC. Yeah.
Especially, yes. You're going to just – I don't know if it's going to be a week in and week out thing. But you're gonna have to have the ability to do it. If you want to be in Atlanta, if you want to be fighting for one of those 12 college football playoff spots, you're going to have to be able to do those things in the passing game if Florida wants to win some games.
For your consideration on any podcast player, search Solid Verbal, find us, and hit follow or subscribe. It's just that easy.
We could sit here and talk till we're blue in the face about what DJ Lagway can do on the field. I'm curious, though, especially in this era of college football where there is just so much movement in the fall, in the spring. What has been his effect on things like recruiting? What has been his effect on things like just roster retention, keeping guys on the roster, avoiding having them transfer out? You know, when you find your guy, it tends to have far-reaching impacts that maybe aren't evident to people who just watch on Saturdays. What has that relationship been like behind the scenes with Lagway on campus, and how has he affected the program in ways that, you know, guys like me can't see?
A sense of belief. I think for the first time under Billy Napier, that's what he brought to the table. On the field, let's just go to on the field last year, too. We've talked about ad nauseum, of course, so far, the turnaround. But part of that turnaround was him getting on the field. And I do think there was some belief on that defensive side of the football. It was like, we have all credit in the world to Graham Mertz. Great guy, great leader in his own right. Was pretty limited at quarterback. He played well at times. He was a good quarterback. Nothing more, nothing less for a lot of the time. But I think there was a certain sense of belief that, hey, this kid DJ Lagway can do some special things. And I think that was a big part in the retention of bringing so many guys back, especially along the offensive line, on offense of, we have our guy. He can lead us to more than what we have seen these last few years. He can pair us with him. If I'm Jake Slaughter, if I'm Austin Barber, it gives me a belief that, okay, I can go to the NFL. Now, NIL plays a big part of it as well. I'm not going to deny that fact, but I don't think those guys are coming back if they don't have a chance to do more. And I think a big part of that is because DJ Lagway and look, J. Michael Sturdivant, the transfer that I mentioned, he's a big reason he came in was because, as I mentioned, that deep threat that DJ Lagway was able to show as a quarterback. He's a big reason why J. Michael Sturdivant's in that wide receiver room. So. And then also just think going back to Billy Napier, I think there's a belief that he can do the things that he hasn't been able to do yet as an offensive coordinator, as a play caller, as a head coach, but because of DJ Lagway. So it's brought a lot more eyeballs on Florida. And I do think that's I think Dallas Wilson, a 5-star receiver, Vernell Brown, a highly level 4-star receiver. I think DJ Lagway is a big part of why those guys ended up at Florida as well. So it really was a trickle-down effect of getting him. And also, I think it's pretty well known in the state of Florida, pretty well known around Gainesville. He's a pretty loyal guy. And I know a lot of people will throw out, well, if Billy Napier gets fired, DJ Lagway he'll look to go somewhere else. I don't know if that's truly the case. He likes it. He likes being at Florida. His girlfriend's on the softball team. I'm sure that's going to play into it as well. But DJ Lagway likes being in Gainesville. DJ Lagway likes being a Florida Gator. Now, if something happens with the coaching staff, I'm sure he would think about it. I'm sure there would be a lot of fighting for Florida to have to keep him, do some fighting to have to keep him. But he truly loves it there. He really loves Billy Napier. He really loves the staff. So I think there's just a belief in, from him, that's a trickle-down effect that, he can be the guy to help turn this thing around.
That's cool. I mean, those are the types of guys that you want to be the face of the program. One thing that this is all bringing to mind is the statement that Scott Stricklin had towards the end of last season when he announced that they were bringing Billy Napier back. And I believe the quote was that they wanted a disciplined, stable approach to the football program, which in a very weird way runs counter to everything college football has become. Like, I don't disagree with that philosophy. We've argued on this show for an eternity that stability is currency, especially in this day and age. But the current state of the sport tends to favor programs that can be aggressive in how they adapt to some of these new circumstances. Behind the scenes, not just with how DJ Lagway is getting on and maybe being that gravitational player, what is Florida doing just as a program on the administrative level, on the NIL front, to keep up with that rapid pace of change?
It's kind of been their approach from the beginning. I mean, and they've really followed it to a T. Now, even Billy Napier said, look, after we got beat by Texas A&M last year, I even had to wonder, was it the right approach? By not heavily attacking the transfer portal. Right? I mean, the best example is Brian Kelly goes to LSU the same year Billy Napier comes to Florida. And they're, right there in the SEC championship game against Georgia. They attack the transfer portal, and, it paid off right away. Jaden Daniels comes in and wins the Heisman the next year. It's just right. Like, why are they so aggressive and right away? And, you see the benefit there for that program. So a lot of people were asking the questions, and they've been steadfast on this. We will recruit to high school level. We will develop. And then, look, that took some hits as well. I mean, you weren't winning enough games. You recruited. You developed Trevor Etienne. He goes to your biggest rival in Georgia. Princely Umamiela's already on the roster, but you develop him for a couple of years. He goes to Ole Miss. You're playing those guys on the other sideline the very next year. And lo and behold, it obviously pays off that year that those storylines happen. But it's been, I think they've had to second guess a lot because of those. And I think it probably was eye-opening that, hey, I could recruit a guy like Trevor Etienne. Georgia didn't want him. Other programs didn't want him. I recruit, I develop. He's going to leave anyway. I think they've learned some hard lessons along the way. And I don't know if they're so cutthroat in believing that, we have to do it this way. But I think initially they want to see if their way is going to work first. I think the leash is pretty forgiving, as we found out last year. And we're going to see if our high school approach works. We're going to see if, especially this year, if our continuity approach works. I mean, we decided to retain guys. That's what they were telling themselves. We're bringing back so many pieces, and we're going to get an answer pretty early in the season. You're going to Baton Rouge and playing an LSU team that brings in a ton of transfers. The very next week against Miami, who was very active in the transfer portal. Ole Miss very active once again in the transfer portal. Florida's an example of continuity and cohesion. Yeah. How is that going to match up with? And we'll get our answer early in the season. So I think it's fascinating that you have Florida playing LSU early, playing Miami early, because polar opposites of the way they have approached how to build a roster since Billy Napier's been here and just in this season. So I think it's going to be fascinating how it pays off. Now, look, you won't get a whole lot of criticism if you go to LSU and lose in a close game. But if you're Billy Napier and you decide to build your roster this way, you can't go to Miami the very next week and lose again to a Miami team that brings in a different quarterback, was very active in the transfer portal. When you have your quarterback returning, when you bring back so much of the previous year's roster, it's polar opposites there, and it's got to pay off this year for Billy Napier.
What is Florida set up from a personnel standpoint? We've done a bunch of these conversations now. people with intimate knowledge of various teams, and it seems everybody has a different role for what a GM, what their player personnel guy or gal does. How has that, I guess, position evolved over the course of the last few years in Gainesville?
They have some new hires there coming into this offseason. I think they made 2 hires in that front office role. Going to be interesting to see, because I still ask, how integral is that in college football?
Yeah.
When we've been trained for so long that it's the head coach in all of those roles.
Right.
And who signs off on the final offer, and who signs off on this offer, that offer, who we're bringing in, who we're keeping, who we're not keeping. Like, what? And maybe every program's different. And we're going to really have to learn as maybe a year from now, of what the actual roles are, because the last signing class was already signed by the time these guys had come in. The early transfer portal had already been signed by the time these new hires come in for Florida. So I think we're still going to try to wait for, at least on Florida's angle, how does it work for them? Because it's kind of new for Florida. And they've had, some guys in some roles there, but this is the first time they've expanded that general manager role, general manager office there. So I'm eager to see, recruiting. If we go by, it was off kind of to a slow start. Now Florida's starting to get a little warm on the trail as we head into June, but it was a little slow start for this 2026 class after a flurry finish for the 2025 class. That got everybody excited. So for Florida, it's almost kind of wait and see approach, because they redesigned the back end, behind the scenes for the general manager parts and general manager roles for this team.
I'm not kidding. If we've done 8 of these conversations, we've gotten 8 different answers on what the GM at a specific program does. And it has been all over the map. And I think most programs are in the same boat, to be honest with you. Everybody is kind of putting their own spin on what that position looks like. Clearly, how good a team is or isn't, I think, has a lot to do with it. But it is definitely something we have to watch.
Yeah, do we ever get to a point in college football where a general manager has the final say over a roster spot over a head coach?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, maybe down the road, but I don't see Kirby Smart.
And by the way, it's not just roles and responsibilities, but it's reporting structure.
Yeah.
Too. At some programs, they are tasked with reporting to the athletic director. At other programs, they are directly reporting into the head coach. It's somebody who is under that head guy. So again, there is so much variability. At some point, I suspect somebody's going to have a Google sheet. They're going to figure out exactly what the calculation is and how much they're worth and what the proper reporting structure should be to optimize the whole operation. But it's just new territory on so many different fronts. Who knows what to expect? Yeah,
we saw so many people try and copy the Saban process from Alabama.
Right.
And nobody hardly ever did it except for Kirby Smart in Georgia. So who's the first one to figure out?
And look, we laughed years ago at Herm Edwards when he talked about coming in and wanting to revolutionize and build a pro model. And granted, didn't work, arguably made things worse, but maybe we've kind of arrived at that point now where more teams are thinking about it in terms of pro football and not so much the version of college football that we've come to know and love after all these decades.
For sure.
Let's wind this down a little bit here by getting back to the Billy Napier storyline. So as you mentioned a couple times now, the results maybe not there quite yet in terms of wins and losses, but the trajectory I think is much improved. That is the exciting part since the last time we had you on this program about 2 years ago. Bigger picture, mindful of the fact that there was some uncertainty with respect to Napier and whether or not he would be retained. Bigger picture within the Florida community, what is Napier's standing? Has there been any kind of vibe shift with respect to how fans feel about him? Did last season represent something of a turning point now where there is more widely held belief that he's the guy to get this thing done?
I still lean toward it gave more of a willing to wait and see approach. Like there were a big majority of the fan base after that Texas A&M game last year was, okay, it's time. It's time to move on. There was a lot of reports that Florida was moving on.
We had calls. Coming into our reverb line. A lot of Florida people were up in arms about that.
Right. So you figured it was going to happen. And then, as our friend Josh Pate would say, Florida had the audacity to go out there and win. So it certainly cooled the seat off a bit. And like I said, it cooled it off. It extended the leash, at least for many to say, okay, now, given we have somewhat of an example, and that's what they're coming off of. Now, if it had been reversed, say Florida started off hot last year and then then ended really, really bad. I don't know if he has that leash he has right now.
I think he's probably gone if that were the case, right?
Yeah, probably so. Probably so if it had been reversed. So I think ending the season the way he did, and don't get me wrong, and it was some big wins. I mean, you kept LSU at the time was on the outside looking in for a playoff spot. You kept them out of a playoff spot in SEC, maybe fighting for an SEC championship spot. And you kicked Ole Miss out of the playoff. And those are some big wins. And I think thankfully for Billy Napier, it was at home as well. You had the home crowd ready for those big wins. After earlier in the season, it was the home crowd who had to suffer through Miami and Texas A&M. So it was an interesting dynamic there. That's how it happened at home. But I think that was a saving grace as well. And then, of course, beat Florida State and win a bowl game for the first time. So I think the end of last year extended the leash a little bit and really made Gator Nation say, all right, we'll pump the brakes a little bit. But now let's see. There's a lot of the fan base, and I've asked questions on Twitter to kind of come at the answer of, we love where this roster is at. Most Gator fans say, well, hey, we like where the roster is. I don't know if Billy Napier's a guy that will get 9 wins, 10 wins to get this team to the college football playoff. That's where the holdup is. There still is a lot of trepidation about Billy Napier, the game day coach.
Yeah.
Billy Napier, the play caller. Can he have better time management? Can he call a better play on 3rd and 2? Can Florida score late in the first half, early in the second half? Can Florida win the middle A? I mean, it's just been those little dynamics that you look at for a football coach that makes the difference, that he really hasn't made that difference or shown he can make that difference yet. Is it just a matter of, okay, now he's got his talent and he'll be able to show those things? So there's still a lot of questions. I hate to kind of cop out and take the easy way out, but when you have a coach that's 500 right now, and a lot of people will acknowledge, what he had to dig out from under Dan Mullen, there's still a lot of questions of, can he be the guy with this roster, his handpicked quarterback, so many pieces returning, to get the most out of a roster that he's built?
With his roster, with his quarterback, with this brutal schedule that I'm looking at right now. Okay. So they play same SEC opponents as last season, but now there are road trips to LSU, to A&M, to Ole Miss. In addition to that, those are 3 teams that should be pretty good in their own right. You've got Texas, you've got Georgia, you've got Tennessee, even Florida State. Maybe Florida State can get its act together this year. Who knows? How many wins for you represent genuine progress versus what is the realistic expectation looking at this slate? Are they the same thing?
You read my mind. I was going to say they're the same thing. 9-3 at bare minimum.
Okay. Is that realistic?
I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is. It's year 4. It's time. We understand the schedule's tough, but if Florida's on the right track, you overcome it. I mean, I think that's the expectation most of Gator Nation has set for Billy Napier. And look, we've had this fascinating conversation like this on our Discord on Gators Breakdown Plus, and it's just like, and one of the users has asked, would you be happy if Florida was Ole Miss last year? If you lose 3 games and late in the season you miss out on the playoff,
I think you would take that, wouldn't you? Given where Florida's been,
I think most did, and as you said, kind of where Florida has been. I think when you look at it and take kind of record away from it, a lot of people's like, no, it's year 4. I won't playoff no matter what. I don't care if it's, and look, maybe Florida gets the benefit of the doubt that Bama, South Carolina, Ole Miss didn't last year because of the schedule. Maybe, and of course, you got to see what happens around you with other teams as well. But I think most people looking at that schedule and say 9-3 should be good enough for Florida in a playoff spot.
Well, look, there's no Oklahoma or Vandy to lose to on this schedule, so they should be fine.
Yeah, you think so. But yeah, I think most of it, even, you can admit both things at the same time. It is a very tough schedule. Nobody is denying that fact. But this might be your best shot. And I know I know you get DJ Lagway back next year, and you get this exciting receiver group returning next year. But as I mentioned, all the trench players that return on both sides of the ball, and they retain this roster to make a run this year. You'll have some heavy roster turnover for the 2026 season. Now maybe the schedule eases up, and who knows what the playoff format is. So maybe you get it anyway. Yeah. But at the same time, I think with the 12-team expanded playoff and what most just think it's time. It's been too long to end up in a 12-team playoff. But I think record-wise, it starts 9-3. If it's 8-4, and maybe depending on the wins, maybe if you get a win over Georgia and that's part of your 8 wins, you buy some Gator fans off with that. But I think 9-3 from all the talks that I've had, and even my own personal feelings a bit, I think 9-3 is that magic record that would show clear progress, whether, I guess, if you make the playoff or not.
Okay. His name is David Waters. You can find all his fine work out at Gators Breakdown. Podcast, website, YouTube channel. Is there anything else that we should mention while we're here before we let you go?
No, just follow recruiting all throughout the summer. Vacations coming up. But we got a big event. If you're a Gator fan and if you listen to other podcasts out there, High Top Sports, Stadium and Gale, late July, we're gonna have a big event in Gainesville. We're calling it the Independent Gator Media Day. So we're trying to get players involved, former players, all that good stuff. You can look at the link for my stuff. But we're trying to. Right after SEC Media Days, kind of going to hold our own little shindig there in Gainesville. So be on the lookout for that.
That's awesome. Again, check out David's work, Gators Breakdown. I got to commend you, man. It's very thorough. You can tell that you are passionate about the team. I read you as often as I can whenever I need to know anything about Florida football. So keep doing what you're doing. It's always a pleasure to have you back on here. And maybe next time we'll have a 9-3 season or better to talk about.
Hopefully so. Maybe Florida is fighting for that playoff spot, and then we can have some conversation going along that way.
You know it. David Waters, again, check him out. Thank you as always for your time. All right, Dan, let's bring it back home.
Yes.
For those wondering who listened to the last 45 or so minutes, Dan was not part of the interview, but Dan is now part of the outro, just the way we work things here on the show. As I said at the very top, I really appreciate Dave's perspective on all things Florida because he is extremely comprehensive in his coverage.
Yes.
And so he is one of those guys. We all have these different sources that we turn to when we have a question about a team to see what they're saying, to see what is going on at a moment in time. David is my guy for all things Florida.
Nice.
So I'm thrilled that we had him on the program. Would encourage everybody to go out and check his work out at GatorsBreakdown.com. Pleasure, as always, to bring him on the show.
Since I haven't listened to it yet, was this year's schedule broached?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Of course.
I counted, I think, 7 plausible playoff conversation teams on this schedule, given that Miami is one of the non-conference opponents on this schedule. And
it's a brutal slate.
It's something.
It's an absolutely brutal slate. It's the same SEC opponents from a year ago, but it's mixing and matching a little bit with where they're playing some of these opponents. And of course, the big question, I pose this one to David as well. What is the reasonable expectation for this team? What will represent progress for this team? And his answer was 9-3.
Sure.
You look at the schedule, 9-3 is going to be a climb. 9-3 maybe gets you on the periphery of the playoff discussion. I don't know. But 9-3 certainly, with this schedule, puts you well within the conversation of the top 15, if they can get there. But a lot is riding on the receiver room, a younger receiver room, finding ways to get pop. A lot of this is riding on their defense continuing to take strides forward. not the least of which is DJ Lagway on the offensive side of the ball. Apparently now healthy, good to go, just had a tired shoulder, but he is definitely that big name that Billy Napier is hanging a lot on. So we shall see. I'm excited to see what the future has in store for the Florida Gators this year in 2025. Of course, would encourage everybody out there, if you've got thoughts on what you heard or just on some of your own prep that you're doing in advance of the season with respect to Florida, hit us up, solidverbal@gmail.com. You can, of course, reach out on social media as well. And last but not least, verballers.com is where you can go if you want to further support out on the Patreon, Dan.
Well, the good news, whether or not 9-3 gets Florida to the periphery of the playoff, the good news is we're 2, maybe 3 short years away from Greg Sankey insisting on like 9 auto bids for the SEC. Hear me out. We've gone to 38 playoff teams. 38. No, in that case, it's literally every team in the SEC is going to get an auto bid. We're not that far off from a 9-3 team that played in the SEC getting an auto bid no matter what, even if they finish 5th or 6th, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many hot button topics floating around the college football ether right now that it's truly tough to keep track of. That's why we're here. We're doing our best to keep everybody up to speed as best we can. But
yes,
we do miss things. If we do, again, please reach out. Let us know.
I have one more sidebar about the Florida Gators.
Yes, please.
Upon Florida adding permanently Won't Back Down by Tom Petty, I believe between the 3rd and 4th quarters, I think it is so killer. I think it is such a killer thing that Florida fans and the Swamp do. It sounds great. It's a great sing-along song. Getting the phone lights out there, I think it is an absolute value add to this sport.
That's a value add. You know what else is a value add?
Please.
We had a chance to witness this when we were up at Michigan. Mr. Brightside.
Mr. Brightside is great.
That was friggin' cool.
Mr. I mean, Brightside,
I've seen the Killers multiple times. Maybe it's cliche, but
jeez, brag much. Yeah.
I've always liked the Killers.
Yeah.
One of my favorite songs ever. The fact that now they play that at Michigan, maybe it doesn't have the same gravitas for the youth of America the way it did for people of your generation, Dan, but nonetheless, it was a really cool scene when they played that up at Michigan.
I think that's like a new, not just Michigan song. I think that is just a full-on new sports anthem in the way that Seven Nation Army, like songs like that, like that song has been taken from the Killers and sort of bestowed upon sports fans everywhere. It's just an anthemic song. And that's how you pronounce that word, right? And that Michigan's using it. It's terrific. It's great.
Awesome. All right. Well, big thanks again to David Waters. Go and check out Gator Dave at gatorsbreakdown.com. Not just the website, not just the podcast, but also YouTube. He is all over the place, does a great job covering the Gators. We will definitely have him on again sometime soon. In the meantime, hit follow, hit subscribe, leave a star rating or review wherever you can. Of course, we appreciate that. For that guy over there, Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand, I'll catch you all next episode. Stay solid.
Peace.